is Thomas Holland, and this is the Fiat 124 Spider Abarth, or Abarth, or Abarte, however you want to say it. The point is that, as many of you know, this is basically a Miata with a few things changed here and there, arguably, many people have said, making it worse. The question is, why would you buy one?
The Fiat 124 Spider is basically a Miata on the inside. Same infotainment, same interior panels, same basic build structure. But the similarities end there. The style and character of this car is most certainly different. When you tick a few boxes on the base of art, like the $3,000 hand-painted racing stripe, the just under $2,000 Brembo brakes, and some safety features, the price comes to around $50,000 Canadian. That's a lot. But on the Abarth, you also get a strut tower brace, a proper limited slip differential, some stiffer springs, fairly aggressive chassis tuning, and a sport button that adjusts traction control and sharpens the throttle. So we have a car that has a more aggressive chassis setup than the Miata, and turbo power, which means that tuning is easier, by the way. Oh, it also has a much more charismatic exhaust note. But even still, many people in the past, including myself, have said that they would choose the Miata. So I had to ask myself why, at the end of the week, I was really sad to see it go.
Now, let's get some stuff out of the way. This 1.4-liter turbocharged engine is not as good, performance-wise, as the naturally aspirated inline-4 in the MX-5, especially now that the MX-5 in 2019 has more poke. So, unfortunately, that's probably the major downside of this car, and there's really no getting away from that. Let's talk about the engine first. It's turbocharged, and it does not, straight up, it does not wake up until 4,000 RPM, at which point you get a little bit of torque like this, and then you hit the red line, and then you're out. There's like this small area where you're in boost, and then it's over, and you have to shift. Coming from a lot of cars nowadays where you hit peak torque at 1,800 RPM, it's really difficult for me to be okay with a car that feels completely dead on the throttle below 3,000 RPM. So that's really the first thing when I drove this car that I was like, what were they thinking? It's absolutely bizarre. We have a sport mode as well, which improves throttle response, but it can't change the turbo lag. There's just, the boost threshold is way too high. The upside, obviously, is you get a little bit more torque, and you can feel that once you get into it, but before then, it's kind of, this is how it feels. Now, that said, after spending some more time with this car, the first time I drove this was on a track, and I drove it very briefly, and I didn't like it then. But after spending a week with this car, for whatever reason, as it turns out, I fell in love with it. Long pause where you all go, oh, here he goes. I'm sorry, I did. Seriously, the turbo lag does not, in the end, take away from how I feel about this car, because it just kind of adds a flaw to a car. The MX-5 is just so perfect at what it does. It's so predictable. You get in a Miata and you're like, yeah, it's a Miata. It's really, really good. And you get in this and it has a little bit more character because there's things wrong with it in a good way. The turbo lag makes it so you go, where's my boost? There it is. Ha-ha! Off you go, winding down a back road like this, and you end up with an engine that you start to like. You start to enjoy the character of it. You start to drive around the turbo, and you know the turbo, and you know where it is, you know where it kicks in, and you start to actually work with the car to find the power. So no, it is not a perfect engine at all, but once you spend some time with it, you actually start to really like it. As it turns out, I didn't think I was going to. Now, there's a bunch of other things too, which make this car something that I would really, really consider over a Miata. For starters, the clutch and the shifter are way heavier than the MX-5. They are, because this transmission, as far as I know, I believe it's from the previous generation, the NC generation Miata. They needed that one to be able to handle the extra torque. So the shifts are heavier. You have to kind of wrestle it into gear, but it's still like ultra precise. It's still, you know, shotgun smooth. And the clutch is much heavier than a regular Miata. This clutch is, there's feel to it. There's feel to the shifter. There's feel to the clutch. Now, let's get on to the rest of the car, because it's only good news from here on in. The front end, while some people don't think that it looks better than Miata, I like it because it's different. It's a Fiat. It has a cartoonishly huge Abarth badge on the front, but I don't mind that. You start to like it, and I like the rear end look of this a lot better than the MX-5. Now, this is the Abarth, which means we've got some tuning that's done that is improved this chassis over the MX-5, in my opinion. We've got some stiffer sway bars, different springs, and some other suspension fettling that's caused this car to be ultra sharp. It's almost so sharp that it's a bit darty on the highway, annoyingly so sometimes. The steering feels very fast, and the front just kind of bangs into the corner. And it feels more tail happy than the MX-5, which I like. So those things together have turned this into almost a handful, almost an Italian car. You see where I'm going with this? And to make matters more Italian, there's a lot of stuff in here that doesn't work properly. My lights in my tailgate don't seem to work. I don't know how to turn them on, and they seem to be not working. The speedometer in this is absolutely useless. There's 30, 60, 90, and 120, and then little ticks in between where you hit, 100, 110. And to make it worse, it's not accurate. It's off by about 6 kilometers an hour, as far as I can tell. If you push set cruise control, my digital readout for my cruise control is 6 kilometers an hour faster than what my speedo's reading. So the calibration isn't even right. And you can't read it. I have no idea what speed I'm going, which makes perfect sense for an Italian car, actually. If you've ever driven in Italy, everyone just kind of chooses where they want to go on the road, and they drive as fast as they possibly can in between stoplights, or they just don't stop at them. So this kind of fits that character. It's not an MX-5. It is a Fiat. It's a 124 Spider, and that makes it different, and that makes it special. It has an eye-watering price tag in Canada of around $50,000, and this one has a several $1,000 hand-painted racing stripe option, which I wouldn't need. I would just wrap the car whatever the heck I wanted myself aftermarket. Now, there are a couple extra options in this, like the Brembo brakes up front, which means this car stops ferociously. And overall, this is still a serious performance two-seat roadster. I really, really like pretty much every aspect of the way that it drives. Once you get used to the turbo, once you get used to the engine, you start to enjoy it. And it sounds better. It's got a growl. I like it. I didn't like it at first, but I like it now. The steering wheel in this is better than the MX-5, the stock steering wheel. In fact, some guys will take this wheel, buy it, and put it on their MX-5 because they like that better, or they get an aftermarket wheel. But this one, it looks cool. It's got like an inlaid, perforated leather stitching here, and it's really meaty on the top. The shift knob is different, and there's a few interior cues that are different. We have a red tachometer, which looks awesome in the day and in the night, but then the rest of the car is pretty much just completely Miata. Which means that the infotainment is okay, difficult to use the navigation, but it's fine, you get used to it. This volume knob down here is a little bit too far back for me. Climate control, super easy to use. The seats are comfortable, except for the fact that the bolsters in the bottom are a little bit too narrow for me, so I sit on top of them. And the steering wheel, while it tilts, it does not telescope, so the 2019 MX-5 has that on it. Otherwise, this is pretty much just a Miata, so we'll gloss over the rest of it. Let's get back to the way it drives, because that's what we're talking about here. If you do not downshift, you don't have any torque, which means that you have to downshift. And if you're a #save the manuals person, that's not a bad thing. I'm in 4th gear right now. If I wanted to accelerate briskly in 4th, nothing, 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 and there's my torque. Let's get back to that speed again. Down here, 4th, down into 3rd, and there's torque. There's a little lag when the turbo kicks in, and off we go. So, you have to downshift. It's forcing you to drive a manual. It's forcing you to use a stick shift. That's good. I want to shift more. I'm actually making a case for this car because I've learned to like it over the week. Yeah, you're going to win the argument every time if you say that the engine in the MX-5 is better, because it is. It's way torquier, the power is instantaneous, it doesn't really feel any slower, and because of gearing it's often quicker to 60. But I've started to like this car. I've started to like the way that you have to drive around the turbo. I've started to like the way that boost comes on kind of frantically. I've started to like the way that you have to shift to use it. So, in the end, I like the 124 Spider. It's a car that I've become fond of, and it's different. It's a Fiat. It's not a Mazda. Everybody has a Miata. Not everybody has. These aren't even selling that well, which means that it's becoming more and more rare. All the more reason to buy one. If you show up in this with 5 other Miatas, all eyes go to you because you're different. That's a good thing.
So there you go. The 124 Spider Abarth might not be the most perfect roadster, but you know what? I think it's one of the coolest. Make sure you subscribe right now because next week I'm testing the 2019 Mazda MX-5. Let's see if it can give the Abarth a run for its money.